Welcome in, everybody. A little different show here, as you can tell, a little different voice greeting you. I'm Mike Renner, hosting today with Dr. Eric Eager of the PFF forecast of the analytics team here at PFF. Sam and Steve are gallivanting around New York City at the moment, eating way too much on Sports Illustrated's dime, way too busy doing fun stuff to be hosting a podcast. So that's why you have us too. And so, Eric, how's it feel to be back on the main stage as it is?
Yeah, we're back here working while, Steve and Sam get to wear half of a nice suit.
Yeah.
And they get to talk about football for a few days in New York City. We are, however, tomorrow night are going to have a draft show featuring you and George and a little bit of a cameo from me. So that'll be a lot of fun. I think Chris, the boss, will be here as well. So still not all that's lost in Cincinnati. In fact,
yes.
I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Definitely will be. So tune into that show tomorrow on the YouTube channel here for the PFF guys. You can watch the Sports Illustrated show on either Sports Illustrated's Twitter or their website. That'll have Sam and Steve. I think we're going to have a little more fun. It's going to be a little more entertaining, but that's just my opinion. I might be a little biased on that. But a couple big news issues to touch on that we thought could use an analytics slant to it, one being the Frank Clark trade, two being Washington rumored to be moving up and targeting a quarterback in the draft here coming up. So the Frank Clark trade, though, Eric, right off the bat, I mean, we were going to hate it, giving up picks. We've said before we didn't even like the Khalil Mack trade, and Khalil Mack was as sure a thing as it gets in terms of being able to rush the passer. You know you're getting the guy in his prime. We didn't even like that. So, Eric, what does the data say?
Yeah, I mean, Frank Clark's a great football player, right? He has a lot going for him. Last season, if you look at sack totals, he had 13, I think, officially. But we look a little bit deeper. We look, 13 plays out of 774 for a player is not going to really sway us as much as his pressure rates were a little bit more modest. Against the run, he hasn't always been strong. And so, I think he's a better player than D Ford. Our wins above replacement metric, our historical grades will always point towards that. But a lot of people on Twitter are comparing him to D Ford. We saw Louis Riddick do this. We saw do that. We've seen
he refused to do that actually. Louis.
Yeah, refused to do it. Yeah, so
which in and of itself is comparing them, but yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's not D Ford versus Frank Clark. It's Frank Clark. It's Frank Clark, but you lose a first round pick, you lose D Ford, and you lose the surplus value there. Ford was a very team friendly deal for San Francisco. Clark, kind of the opposite for Kansas City. His salary cap hit this year is a little under $5 million. Next year it's $28 for a team that is just getting under the cap, having lost Justin Houston and Ford, and in the trade of Alex Smith a year ago and things like that. So it's kind of puzzling for Kansas City. We know that coverage is more important in many cases than pressure. And the Chiefs still, they're one of their top three corners is Rashad Breeland right now. Another one is Charvarius Ward. So there was going to be corners that fell to them at 29. That was a sweet spot for them. They gave that up for Frank Clark.
Yes, and the big thing here to me is, okay, so I don't think Ford's the great comparison because everyone wants to make that comparison and say, oh, Ford wasn't a scheme fit. It wasn't going to fit into their run defense, which is a whole different conversation of whether or not you can fit a talented player who's that good at rushing the passer like Ford. If you can't fit him into your scheme, I question you as defensive coordinator. But all that aside, it's more the difference between you knew then this whole offseason when you hired T. Spagnuolo that D. Ford wasn't a scheme fit. You knew this. And yet you passed on a deep edge free agent class that included Trey Flowers, who was a scheme fit, included Preston Smith, who would have been a scheme fit, included Zadarius Smith, who also would have been a scheme fit. These edge rushers that actually could have come in for 0 picks given up. You absolutely skewed that edge class to then trade for a guy who you're paying more than any of those edges. And Frank Clark, a fantastic player. In his prime, not even 26 years old yet. There's a lot to like about him, but he wasn't elite by any means in terms of he's not Khalil Mack. This isn't you're getting $5 million. You're not getting that guy. He's
not even DeMarcus Lawrence, frankly. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and doesn't this? I think this is interesting. And tomorrow night's the draft, right? And the thing that we rag against for trading up is you don't know, right? You don't know as much as you think you do. So giving up multiple assets for a chance is not necessarily sound in football. You just laid out a case for in free agency, it's the exact same. When you can choose between Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, folks like that, D Ford on your own team, Justin Houston was available for an amount of time. and
Trey Flowers,
and you decide to give up multiple assets because you think that among those players, this one's the best. I think that that's a faulty way to go about business. And so we even see it in free agency, the overconfidence that is inherent in the NFL rears its ugly head.
Yeah, and I just think if you objectively look at it, they spent more money this season they had spent last season at edge, and got worse. Justin Houston was productive last year. Dee Ford extremely productive last year. Now, whether those guys will continue in the future, I'm not hating on the decision to let Ford go or Houston walk at his age with his injury history. Yep. But you had other options besides giving up first and second round picks. So that's why.
And now it leaves you with so 2017 they looked at Terrence Mitchell's 2016 season where he was worth about a half, 1/5 of a win, right? And they were like, okay, even though he's unproven, we're going to go into the season with him. Complete flop. Last season, they're like, okay, we're going to go into the season with David Amerson as our third corner. It eventually had to be Orlando Scandrick, and that was kind of a flop. Charvarius Ward has a representable few games. Now they're going to go into the season. It seems like they continue to repeat the same process. Rashad Breeland played 330 snaps. He was below replacement level last year for Green Bay. He's had an up and down career. Good year in 2015, good year in 2017. Like, you're the Chiefs, I think you're making the wrong bets right now. And, when the Patrick Peterson thing came up yesterday, I was pretty excited because, again, if they get him for a second, it starts to feel like the Rams last year. This feels like like they're reaching to be the Rams last year, which is tough for me. That being said, you have the best quarterback in football. You have one of the best offensive minds in football. They're still a favorite to win the Super Bowl. I just think long-term, you look across and you look at Chris Ballard in Indianapolis, Brett Veach in Kansas City. You just have to be afraid that they're going to lap you at some point.
Yeah, I don't think it was. So we're not saying this makes them a worse team this year. They're probably better than they would have been with that first and second round pick this year. We're saying that the decision making over the entire course of the offseason could have made you better this year and given you more picks this year and better long term in the future. So that being said, that's our take on the Kansas City Chiefs trade. The Seattle Seahawks got an absolute steal.
Good for them.
They know firsthand that dealing first rounders for talent, to pay talent at market value, can gut your roster because, one, you don't get to sign free agents, and then two, you don't get to draft first rounders, which they went a while with just not hitting on draft picks, and that's why they kind of had that mini rebuild of late. So that's that. Let's move on, though, to the Washington Redskins, who are rumored to be looking for a quarterback, moving up from 15. And I kind of said it, that they're in a bad position. I said this earlier in the season. They're in a bad position. They can be one of the few teams who can just say, we're going to suck for 2019. We're just going to be bad, and then we get it next year. It's not a great quarterback class, and to get the fourth guy and third guy and not a great quarterback class is not ideal. So just take your lumps this year and then hope you get Tua next year if he's really the guy. But they look to be having the opposite take on this.
Right. And do you see it? Do you see any option for them? Right. Because at 15, they're going to be overbuying any quarterback in this draft. Right. Like if Daniel Jones falls to 15, it's going to be because even the New York Giants didn't want him. Yes. Right. If Drew Lock falls to 15, it's because even Denver didn't want him. Haskins, same thing. But the one option that I think they did have to salvage this season would be to trade it for Josh Rosen, right? Because he's already surrendered the rookie first year part of his rookie deal. There's some known to him, right? So you've seen him at the NFL level, and Jay Gruden's okay at at calling plays and things like that, so he could mold an offense around him in Washington. Like, to me, that's the only place where they're going to have value, and it doesn't seem like even they are willing to do that. Because this looks bad. I mean, if they surrender future picks, because it's not only going to take a pick this year, it's probably going to take picks next year, that when they're actually ready to win football games, that's going to be really rough.
That's the biggest thing to me, why this makes me uneasy. And if I was a Redskins fan, I'd be a little upset about this, is the fact that if you're moving up anywhere considerably to go get one of the quarterbacks, so go get the second quarterback off the board. Say Kyler Murray goes 1. You want to go up and get the second guy. You think Daniel Jones is your guy. You're giving up a 2020 first rounder. Yeah. Like, that is what you'll have to give up. A second, a third, a fourth in this draft. I don't think it's going to cut it. You're going to give up another first rounder, which at that point, that roster, the way it's set up right now, is probably going to be a top 10 pick. Just not going to sugarcoat it. It's not looking great for them in 2019. So you're giving up another top 10 pick, which that could turn into a legit quarterback in maybe a better quarterback draft.
For sure.
I wonder how far they would actually be willing to go, or if it's more just they want to jump Miami if someone falls to that sort of spot.
And Miami's interesting, right? So we were talking about this on the forecast the other day. What Miami does this year is really going to be an interesting study in how to sort of tank, right? Because if they don't take a quarterback and they sort of like trade down, right? Then, or like if they trade down or don't take a quarterback, but at least they don't trade up, then they don't necessarily need to tank during the season, right? Because the only reason that you would have to go after the number 1 overall pick in a draft to lose all your games is if you have no means to get to the number 1 pick other than to lose all those games. Mm-hmm. If Miami were to trade back, or Miami were to, be smart and push picks off into the future, they don't have to go 2-14 to get the number 1 pick, mm-hmm. because they're going to be sitting there with pick 6 and pick 27, or that. And so I'm really interested to see Miami's approach to this, because it looks like they're bringing in some pretty smart people with Flores and company. And so that to me, as you bring up Miami, is super interesting. Do they entice Washington to make a terrible decision to move up 2 spots?
Yeah.
For as you said, maybe the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in this draft.
Yeah, the trades that will go on draft day are very interesting. That'll be my favorite thing to watch the draft, because I'm hearing the rumors 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 15. 4.
Which is only 1 less than last year, which is a historically good quarterback class for
4 go top 15. The Broncos, Dolphins, and Redskins all in that range are going to be the jockeying there. Will be interesting to watch, but we'll get to that obviously tonight and see what happens. We're just going to get to you guys a little bit, pull back the curtain now about what we went through this draft process, what we've been doing, and our sort of dynamic here with the analytics team and the scouting draft team, mm-hmm. in terms of how we came about, just all the work we've done this spring. So, Eric, the floor is yours. What have you been up to lately?
So we've done a decent amount, especially for offensive line and QB, of trying to project how a player is going to do in a particular scheme. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. Like, our interactions with the teams, our interaction with media, people who know football really well, have led us to the yeah buts, right? And the yeah buts always being, this guard, like Dalton Reisner's good, but mm-hmm. here are the number of reasons why you might be wrong about him. Or, we run this, right? So this player hasn't ever actually done this. So can you consider this part to your model and everything? And that's been extremely fruitful. But then the great thing is that we get to talk to you guys every day, right? So our initial modeling, we run our models, and initially we have Jonah Williams not necessarily as good as expected. And yet, I can watch your video, or I can read your post, or I can just talk to you in the office about why you think Jonah Williams is good. And so then, that's not always going to adjust my metrics, and not only adjust how I go about my life, but it oftentimes will lead me to think, am I accounting for this variable properly? Or am I adjusting for context properly? Am I projecting? Am I considering sample size too much? Because as you said before, it's like, there are going to be some positions where sample size is just going to be the curse you have to deal with all the time. Mm-hmm. And there are some positions where sample size matters more. And so it's been a really great experience, and we don't always agree. I think I'm a little bit higher on Dalton Reisner than you are, and maybe not as high on Jonah, but at the same time, I have converged a little bit on him, and I can certainly see why, if I'm wrong about Jonah Williams, why it would be.
Yeah, and that's one of definitely the best parts about having you guys in the office, and why I've loved coming to the office this spring, is because we go back and forth on Dalton Reisner has been one, especially where I'm just I worry about this, the fact that he probably didn't face one edge rusher besides Montez Sweat that's going to play in the league. That's actually going to play. I worry about that. And having Jawan Taylor having faced Brian Burns, Josh Allen, 2 guys who are going to go top 15, it's just – those guys are going to win at a high rate. There's just that adjustment level is difficult to sort of bake into the data. Have you guys what kind of sort of headway have you made in terms of basically just that whole problem in general that exists in college football in terms of adjusting for competition, who you're going against, what the grades actually, when to skew them for that?
Yeah, so we do have power rankings for every single, basically every single team that somebody will face. And so when we go and back test Carson Wentz, for example, the thing about it is that he's facing the lowest graded team, because he's facing Division I, AA, or FCS, and we also have for quarterbacks, we have it baked in, like if we have their own team's PFF ELO rating in there as well. So Murray, and we got in a discussion about this on Twitter yesterday, if Murray's playing with a bunch of NFL players, that should be baked into the model. If Daniel Jones, as some of you talked about last week, if Daniel Jones is playing with 0 NFL players on his team, like we should consider that, and it shouldn't swing a guy, 2 percentage points in his passer rating or his completion percentage during the course of a projection. But what it should do is it should move it marginally, and if it should break ties mathematically. And so we have put in like Dalton Reisner, for example, like his projection did go down a little bit based upon like some adjustments to his schedule and things like that. And same thing with Juwan Taylor. Juwan Taylor went up. He's probably if you put all told, a top 5 tackle, and even in the and analytics part of this projection. So those things are well founded. You especially see it at the QB position, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that has helped us in terms of figuring out which throws actually matter. And seeing seeing that not just having guys open in like the Oklahoma offense with Baker Mayfield. Yes, he has more guys open, but he's also hitting them accurately. Even if a guy is open, is still something that's difficult to do. That not a lot of guys do.
Yeah, and the cool thing is like we get to challenge these narratives, right? So for example, Washington State, Andre Dillard, I think historically would always say, okay, well, he's a Washington State tackle, so we have to like drop him. His ceiling isn't very high at the NFL level because he just isn't doing what he's going to do at the NFL level. And somebody like you can go in and look at the data and say, well, actually, like he's got a decent amount of full pass sets. Our model adjusts for that, right? So we have a play-by-play adjustment for time to throw, how many pass rushers, things like that. And we're coming to similar conclusions. At the quarterback position, like I think like early on in like the 90s, like guys like Andre Ware would win the Heisman Trophy, get drafted, stink. Dave Klingler for Houston, same thing. And like so people would shy away from these, Big 12 offenses and things like that, these air raid type offenses. And now we're starting to see, well, actually, like we can learn a ton about a quarterback because in those air raid offenses, they have a clean pocket, and we know clean pockets, tell us a lot about a quarterback, both if he's good or not. If a guy can't make good throws from a clean pocket repeatedly in the Big 12, I don't care how good his arm looks, type of thing. So it is like I think what's really cool is that we get to challenge all these narratives and we get to build upon our existing knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And I've talked about this. We've talked about a little bit our plans for the future in terms of I think the more we can put just data and numbers to everything we do, being the ideal scenario in terms of we have all this grading for all these positions. And one of my favorite things, one of the things that gives us, I think, at PFF, watching the tape and building our draft board, the biggest leg up of anyone who actually does this is the fact that we can do cut-ups of anything you basically want. We can watch all 80 snaps where a guy went up against, had 2.5 plus seconds. So all 80 snaps that offensive tackle had 2.5 plus seconds to throw. A normal pass blocking stats, we can press one button and we get that cut up of all those 80 snaps right away because of the data we track and the tool we have to do that. That's one of my favorite things. I think that in the future, what's going to happen is we're going to track even more of that for even more positions. We do it for quarterbacks now. Offensive line already gets a pretty good sort of run through in terms of every play, getting that interaction data, who you're going up against. Even more tracking for wide receiver and cornerbacks, other positions on the football field to get basically a sort of scale, even more detail for every single play to then drill down to and be able to, just pull out the things that actually matter.
Yeah, I mean, the fun part about football is there is irreducible noise, right?
Yeah.
But the more of it that we can sort of take away and chip away at, the better. And I think for offensive line play, the article we wrote a couple weeks ago, but like the proof is in the pudding. The fact is like, especially for pass blocking, the grades do a terrific job of projecting how a guy's going to do at the next level. And as long as you build in some uncertainty associated with like where he's picked, what type of scheme he's in, all those types of things, you can do a pretty good job of saying if he's good here, he's going to be good there. And that's all really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's that. Well, I think it was a good conversation. We didn't really want to do too much here today with Sam and Steve out. Just a sort of brief overview of how we've gone about this draft process. But Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me one guy in this draft class that the analytics, the numbers solely itself hate, that we think even on our draft board you're like, that's too high. And one guy that the analytics data you think even on our draft board you're like, he's too low.
Man, that's so and the draft board. So I haven't acquainted myself as much. So Will Grier is the person who's too low on everybody's draft board.
Okay.
And the problem is I respect your opinion enough to not say Daniel Jones for the second one.
I will say so Grier, the stat that really jumped out to me when I was drilling through our quarterback charting data was he on throws within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, he was off target, I think 5% of the time, like 5.5% of the time. And that was like far and away the lowest. Like he was on target at least.
And what's the most important thing about football is to take advantage of it. There's two things that are inherent in football. One of them is not making mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so the things that are given to you, take them all the time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is plus plays. And we've seen Will Grier like on over the shoulder throws, on like deep plays, like
most big time throws in class. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you're looking at a player like that, if a player's like Tom Brady, and I think it was you that said this on Twitter, Tom Brady's ability to never throw an inaccurate pass underneath the coverage is one of his biggest strengths. And then, of course, Grier, I think, does have the potential to hit those plays over the top. So that's one.
That's the twofold. You have to be able to. You have to have both.
Yeah.
You can't just be.
You can't just
Cody
be
Kessler.
Cody Kessler.
Exactly.
That was the name that came to my mind completely. I think. So let's go to center. Eric McCoy, I think, is somebody who our analytics are really high on, both as a winning as a run blocker, but winning as a pass protector. Texas A&M center. There are some teams that need players there, and I think he's going to be a good one. Usually, like our rankings for these have been pretty close, and just a name or two flip. And I think by virtue of position scarcity and value, like a guy, like the difference between the second and third best center on a big board is like 15 positions, right? So that's kind of like where.
But they're really not that.
Yeah, but they're really not that different. It just depends upon how the board shakes out. So that's somebody that I kind of like. Let's go with that.
All right, Eric McCoy. I had issues with him at the Senior Bowl. Was the biggest reason why, where he just struggled against bull rushes. But I do try. I can see it. I think he could be good. Well, thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Enjoy the draft this weekend. We'll be back after the draft breaking down everything that happened, and we'll have videos on the YouTube channel breaking down all the selections of the first round, some of our favorites from day 2 and then day 3 as well, maybe some of our least favorites also. And make sure, you guys, if you want the draft guide, we're running a special right now, PFF 19, that's not the actual one. It is Draft 19, gosh, that would have been bad if I gave you the wrong promo code. Promo code Draft 19, you get 25% off. So Elites, instead of $200 for the yearly, it's $150. Edge, instead of, I don't even know how much it is normally, but it's 25% off of what it is normally. And you get this year's draft guide. You'll get next year's draft guide if you get the year subscription, because we'll drop it in before that, and you'll get maybe a preseason draft guide before the season starts.
We're so rich with data that we're like the person who doesn't know how much a gallon of milk costs when it comes to data.
So it's like something. So there you have it, guys. Enjoy the draft. We'll be back next week. Have a good one.